Our next speaker writes for print. He shoots and directs for television. He likes to travel to places where he can be incognito. He's attracted to places of chaos, he says, in order to challenge himself and improve himself. We know him as Sasha, and that implies that we know him at all, but in fact, he is the other, quieter Trudeau, Alexandre Trudeau.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Well, it is IdeaCity, so I thought I'd talk about ideas and not conflict in travel, which is really the reason why I go out there on the edge. Is I'm driven to travel not mostly in geographic space, but in ideal space. When I was a kid, I plastered maps all over the walls of my room. I dreamt of traveling. I dreamt really of seeing new things, things that no one had seen before. I felt I was born in the wrong age, that I should have been an explorer. There should be something left for me to explore, to discover new lands. But gazing at my maps, I felt that there was really nothing new to see, at least for a while. We think of explorers. The classic explorer obviously goes out there to appropriate land, to bring it into the fold of their metropoles, to plant the flag. They're agents of colonial enterprise. There's also missionaries who are searching for souls to convert, always bringing the new into the old world. Obviously, the tools are important. The explorers really blossomed when they had the tools to get out across the ocean and return, bringing something back. But there are also independent explorers, rogue explorers, accidental explorers, mere explorers. The fisherman who in his fishing boat gets carried off by a storm and lands on far shores. One can only imagine that before traditional exploration happened, contact was always happening. For the 100 of fishermen who got lost, 1 or 2 might have arrived in Newfoundland or in Brazil or somewhere like that, and obviously had no means of returning. These are the kind of explorers that really I caught on to at a young age, that really they were independent, and also the idea of coming back was not so important. The explorers that don't come back. We think of migration, of the peoples of the earth who travel to different places, really exploring and then settling. Look at the Pacific Islands, where people in canoes with rudimentary means cross thousands of kilometers of sea to set up a new establishment, and all the Pacific was colonized this way. Or even more astounding, to a certain extent, is Australia and New Guinea, 30,000 years ago. People who now, in many senses, have no use of watercraft, crossed about 100 kilometers of ocean to continue their journey. And these are, at the time, were Stone Age people. Yet what a great leap they made. In the medieval ages, people had fear of the edge of the world. There was a thought that if you traveled far enough, you'd really fall off the world, or that you cross over into some kind of other world where demons and monsters, and this is, I guess, what kept the non-explorers at home. Obviously, explorers were curious to see this. If one talks about the edge, I personally, and this is something of what drives me, want to see the edge. Hell, I'll see the demons and the monsters. I'm curious. Terrifying is better than boring if you survive. The flat world of the primitive minds had something deeper in it. Really, there was no quantitative grid applied to the world. There was no substratum to unify the here and the there. What really unified these experiences were personal experiences. I'm going there, that's how I know that that place is unified with now, is my experience of travel between the two. Or the tales that would recount how you get there. One thinks of the primitive maps, early maps, which were linear maps, which have nothing to do with the maps today, which have a kind of bird's eye view, which already has this view of a unified substratum to our physical space. But the linear map, you had an event, really, and then a time of walking to the next event. You had a mountain, then you walk to the lake, and then you had this. So you have native Canadian belts, which are maps, which just different little moments along a trip somewhere. And there's no real sense of what else is there. The round world is interesting in that it sets its own limits. You always, if you travel distance, you're always going to come back to where you started. So when the first big discoverers, people like Magellan, crossed the tip of the Americas and into the Pacific and started encountering the islands on the other side, they were discovering that there were limits to discovery. They were discovering that there was a point when there would be no great more discoveries in this space, in this round world. It was only left to fill in the world. And now, of course, we have satellite imagery, which will take a picture of every part of this world. In fact, we've sent people up there to look at the world as a round space. Space has extended a quantitative three-dimensional grid ad infinitum. 100,000 kilometers you can go, 30 light years, theoretically travelable without ever coming to an edge. I've always been personally skeptical of spacecraft and airplanes. It always felt that you get in, they change the scenery, and you get out. So I started conducting at a young age a series of tests, whether this was a grand illusion or not. I would walk out of the house and go onto the road and stick out my thumb, and this way try and confirm that space was in fact contiguous. I filled in the space from here to the Pacific with smells, wet sleeps, wet cold sleeps in open spaces, in bushes and mountains, and people most of all. Vietnam vets, perverts, tradesmen, families, freaks, hippies, criminals, pretty girls. The space between here and the Pacific was that. So I decided to conduct another test in more outlandish places. And what more outlandish place than Timbuktu? I managed to get to the American coast and got on a sailboat, and after many weeks of endless sea, got over the other side and more land, and in fact got down to Africa and crossed the desert, and never actually got to Timbuktu. It was a place, the desert had taken it over, and at that time, you really just had to hire a Touareg, give them $500 to jeep you out to Timbuktu, and I was cheap, so I didn't do it. But the fact is, space was becoming filled in. I remember in Sierra Leone, I was trying to get in with this group of warriors, the Kamajor warriors. Now, these people were spectacular. They were covered in juju charms, which made them invisible or bulletproof in battle. They were very, unlike a lot of the other fighters, and very disciplined, traditional people. And I remember getting to where where their area was starting and trying to get my bearings. I took out a map, and suddenly they gather around with awe. A map reader, as if it were some skill. But as I sort of pursued getting to know them and wanted to travel with them to Freetown, they were going to mount an attack on Freetown, which was occupied by a rebel junta at the time. They suddenly became unimpressed with my map and said, well, you have no means, you cannot go there. That they were crossing this jungle, and they really had the implication that I hadn't the physical means, the physical body to cross the spaces they were going to cross. And sure enough, one night we were sitting around and went to bed in the jungle, and without knowing, at 5 a.m. when I got up, they had all just disappeared. Some good my maps were. Cars and people are perhaps the distraction. I once went in Madagascar. I figured that I looked at the map, and there was a place where this dirt road came to an end, and then there was an open space. And then I could see on the other side, a whole nother network of roads started up. So I walked across it. I carried a big piece of metal, a 60mm camera to document it. And sure enough, on the other side, space continued. So physical space, as far as I could tell, is contiguous. I lost my sense of wonder for maps as I filled them in. They really give a slim picture. They don't describe the whole worlds, and they don't describe the many worlds, the worlds of the Kamajor. So really early on, despite these tests, I decided that as an explorer, I would not explore in physical space. At least what I would discover would not be in physical space. Immanuel Kant never left Königsberg, or at least hardly left it. He didn't need to. In fact, the people would joke that as he walked around town, they would set their watches because he would just every day do this one circuit of Königsberg and always the same time, same place. Kant already knew that nothing new is to be seen. Consciousness always occurs in space and time. He didn't mean to be an explorer, yet he was a master explorer. He was the first one who really set the path for getting to the edge of the world, but not the physical world, but the world of ideas. And in exploration, I returned to him for the basics. He's an idealist. That doesn't mean he believes in some kind of utopian reality. It believes that, all we ever know are ideas. All we ever know are ideas of things. And what can we know about how we know them? Was the work he was doing. His great conclusion is that we only know ideas of things, but we provide the grid that makes them distinct in our mind. We provide the space and time. As I said, our consciousness always occurs as space and time. This made him very nervous. Kant was a very rigorous, prudish man. And he was really embarked on this matter of thought because he was against grandiose claims about things we really could not know about God being this or that, or about immortality or freedom in strange transcendent ways. So he wanted to map out what it is we could know. So the idea of us providing the grid to things, to the ideas of things, really made him nervous because it puts us in the position of being a creator, and then the second role he had was the judge. And there were some pretty far-fetched ideas before him that went down this route. So we provide the space, time, the connections, the distinctions between the ideas of things. But where do we get the idea for the thing? From the thing itself? No, we cannot. We have no knowledge of the thing itself. All we ever know, as I said, are the ideas of things. Kant squirms when he gives the only answer possible. We get the idea from our imagination. We know the thing we imagine it to be. We know the idea of the thing as if it were real. The conditions of possibility of consciousness, he called them, determine the perception we have of things. This, an explorer like myself took note of, because it at the same time sets the edge to the world and sets how the new is new within our conscious spheres. But what a terrifying responsibility for consciousness. At least we are held in check by the grid, the conditions of possibility through which we are conscious, space, time, substance, causality, etc. But where do they come from, these conditions, and what are they made of? They too have their story. The story goes, Hegel was putting the final touches on his phenomenology of spirit as Napoleon's guns were blasting the Prussian army outside of Vienna. The whole world was moving. explaining the creation of the shape of the conditions of possibility of consciousness. The facts of consciousness moved. They moved. They had a history. The very grid of space and time we applied, if ever so slightly, moved. So Hegel would tell the narrative from when and where they weren't to when and where they were and had to be. He would put the world back together again. How dare he clone the world, Nietzsche said. The exercise of consciousness is full of imperfections and aberrations. And we love these imperfections and aberrations. Hegel would condemn us to the end of history, worse, to the eternal return of the same. In the constant and automatic application of the grid, mutations of space and time, of matter occur. They mostly don't survive. It's a hard world out there. But what if they do? For example, typical Hegelian thought, you are a mutant. I am perfect. How dare I pretend to know you? But Hegel has an answer for everything. I am perfect, you are a mutant. I try to make you disappear. And you me. I try and kill you, eat you. Bring the perfection back to the world, and you do the same. I succeed, game over. You succeed, game over. The world is perfect again. But maybe I surrender first, maybe you. And I put you to work. Make me a chair so I can sit. Make me a garden. Make me lunch. While I do nothing, you do these things. You make things. Your garden, your food, your thought, your sweat, your world. I'm just another thing in it. And the world is perfect again. Anyhow, enough of Hegel. The perfect world always ends up the same. And it's no fun for explorers. Everything may not be real, but it has the whole history of the creation of the world supporting it. That's the Hegelian view. If, and only if, time moves forward. If time comes from the past, history is a base, a proud support for fleeting reality. But if time comes from the future, history is a shadow. I move here, this history. I move there, that history. It's terrifying, this responsibility of consciousness. But as I say, terrifying is better than boring. So I'm here. Or Heidegger says, I am in fact there. I am the being there. Where? Just there. Sure, you could tell the story of consciousness that is not just being there or here, but anywhere and nowhere, and build consciousness out everywhere. This is what Hegel tried to do. But as Nietzsche says, the danger is not in failing to tell the story right, but in telling it too right. A world without a future. So for Heidegger, I am only the being there. The being in the world as if it were real. In the world, chit-chatting, having fun, being in the world. Time flies when you're having fun. And my life is over. I'm dead. But not so fast. I want to be resolute towards my death. I want to get the most of my life. My conditions of possibility gaze through my death onto that which I will be. For Heidegger, the time of consciousness, of memory and matter, moves differently than the time of conditions of possibility of consciousness. These conditions come from the future, whereas the time of consciousness, of the matter, of the experiences of consciousness, are aligned in memory and matter. Heidegger's world is somewhat mystical, haunted by the call of the future. Like Nietzsche before, the things we cannot support with the history call out to us. They are not the things of the world. They are, for example, the things of the earth. They are also the other, whom I cannot bring into the fold of my world. These things of the future are not there, but it is our responsibility to clear a place for them and to invite them to occur. This is the edge of the world. The question of our time is whether we are a world rich or poor in future. Are we enacting ever and ever again the time of our creation, or are we creating the time of our future? Like old Plato's cave, the thing least real is the thing we see, whose time and matter we share, but yet a mere shadow of the future. In this world, the real explorer is an idealist. Ideas do not only change the world, they create it. Over the edge after this is a strange land, not unlike the place of monsters and demons of the Middle Ages vision. Gilles Deleuze, the last great explorer, saw it as the place and time of conscious machines. The car consciousness, predatory and linear. The number consciousness of percentages, speculations, fractions, monies. The plant consciousness of rampant proliferation. The mouth consciousness, the gun consciousness. All autonomous consciousnesses piled upon each other, a whole demonicon of them, each generating worlds in and around us, so much so that we are no longer. Yes, perhaps as the primeval 1,000 layers of consciousness, the lurches of gods and monsters descend, some force will steal a fire into the world. Out of the technological flux, a fire for us to begin our education in the cave. I continue to explore. I don't know if I will return to the city or stay on the far shores. Anyhow, fellow idealists, thanks for hearing me out.